wind just came through with these red hot embers that just fully filled the living room.
And the fire just came and got them both.
Everything I've ever worked for my entire life was there. It's all I have.
People are suffering.
We know that those who are on the front lines have been fighting this since last Tuesday morning.
It was one of the worst moments of my life.
It was definitely a sight to behold.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this one-hour special Wildfire Watch California in Crisis. I'm Jeff Cornish.
And I'm Bree Guy. Tonight, we explore the devastating impact of this wind-driven inferno burning in Los Angeles, from the cause behind it, the current challenges, and the path forward.
These deadly fires have been burning now for nearly a week, causing devastating damage. Here is the latest. We're going to give you the update on how we got here and where we stand right now. We have been exceptionally dry in Southern California. Bree, Northern California has had a surplus in rain, but south of I-80, we just can't seem to buy a drop. Yeah,
it's a stark story, a stark contrast, because we just haven't been able to pick up a lot of rain. And so it has been so dry. I mean, the dew points tell the story. If we break it down for you, when we see dew points in the teens or single digits, we are bone dry. That's just helping to fuel these fires. And this takes dry vegetation and further amplifies its dryness, making the fuel for fires primed and ready. So when it comes to the three most recent fires, yes, we had 5 at one point last week. There are still 2 that we're really concerned about. Crews have done a great job containing the Hearst fire, but the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire continue to rage on. Yeah, unfortunately, we are still monitoring the situation very closely, Jeff, because the fire threat isn't over, and we are concerned about areas like Malibu potentially as we do head over the next few days. So we're watching all of these fires very closely as the conditions are still not completely in control. And the stats are pretty staggering. Yes, we've seen 40,000 acres burned, but this is a high impact area for a large fire or a series of fires, and the fatalities have risen to 24. Our concern is, and the officials are saying, and it makes sense when you see the rubble, they expect that number to continue to climb from what has happened over the past 6 days. Yeah, it's just devastating to hear about, and it's heartbreaking to see some of that video that continues to come out as well. But we want you to be on high alert because, like I mentioned earlier, the fire threat isn't done. So we do have those red flag warnings in effect and a particularly dangerous situation in effect, similar to what we had last week, Jeff. Yeah, this is the most strongly phrased type of red flag warning, which is the advisory about fire danger, kind of like a tornado warning, but for fire threats. This is as high as the scale goes. Winds are going to be ramping back up. And you mentioned that Malibu, west of Los Angeles, is at the greatest risk because it's just beyond the head of the Palisades fire. We're going to see some strong gusts, 60 to 80 miles per hour over the next few days. Yeah, and as we've learned from these fires, these embers can be carried miles away, so it doesn't take a lot, especially when we have these gusty winds, to set different towns ablaze. And as crews fight to contain these wildfires raging in Los Angeles County, AccuWeather partner CNN News Source correspondent Lee Waldman joins us live from Pacific Palisades. Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Can you describe the scene that you're in right now in a neighborhood like Pacific Palisades and Altadena, which have been described as apocalyptic and total destruction?
Yeah, there's so much damage here. We're waving at some of the fire crews that are coming through. They're hard at work looking for any remaining hot spots that are hiding in some of the rubble and ash that remains in this neighborhood. It's been a flurry of activity since we got here today, and even before we got here. We've seen a lot of utility workers that are coming through, trying to shut off any of the gas because we know there's open gas lines. They're trying to get for the houses that are up and standing still. You can see some homes that are standing off in the distance. A generator was put by the city outside outside of those homes to make sure that they have sewage that can run. So there's a lot of work still being done here to make this area safe for people to be able to come back again, because as you know, people have not been able to come back to this neighborhood. So there's a lot going on in neighborhoods like Pacific Palisades that have been vastly impacted by these wildfires that continue to burn.
And Lee, what are officials saying about the timeline as to when they will be able to fully assess the death toll and the extent of the damage?
That is still something that's really up in the air right now. We know that there is grid searches happening right now in neighborhoods like this one, but also neighborhoods like Altadena that were impacted by the Eaton fire. They're going through with cadaver dogs and they're sifting through the rubble of these homes. That's why they had to stop those escort services to bring people into their neighborhoods to see what they could recover from their homes, because it was creating so much chaos in the streets there, because the officers are having to do those search and rescue efforts. They're asking people for patience, and they said today that they're quite literally finding the remains of their neighbors right now in the homes that are destroyed by these fires. That's why they don't know exactly when they'll be able to release a final death toll from all of this.
And Lee, you know, the first question that comes to many people's minds is, how did this happen? How did these fires start? Can you provide any more details about the cause of these fires and the ongoing investigations into how they started?
We know that this is going to be a very thorough investigation. At this point, the ATF is going to be one of the lead agencies investigating these fires. That was announced just a few days ago by officials here. We also know that 2 teams from the Maui fires are being brought in to assist with the investigations into these fires. We know that arson crews are on hand, including an arson detection dog, trying to get to the bottom of what caused these fires. No stone is going to be left unturned here.
Well, thank you so much, Lee, for checking back in with us. AccuWeather partner, CNN News Source correspondent Lee Waldman. Thank you.
And we want to switch gears a little bit as we look at the wildfires burning through Southern California, expected to be the costliest in modern U.S. history, not just for California, but for the entire nation.
Yeah, AccuWeather's Bill Wadell is alive in Pacific Palisades right now. Bill, the numbers keep climbing, unfortunately. Can you just describe what is happening where you are?
Yeah, Bree and Jeff, the damage that surrounds us is just catastrophic and heartbreaking for so many of the families here in Southern California that have been impacted by these wildfires. It's calm right now where we are in Pacific Palisades up in the hills, not seeing much wind at all, but just within the past hour, we've started hearing the noises return of the helicopters up above with water drops, and we expect to hear more of that, more firefighting efforts as these winds start to pick up later today, especially tomorrow. This is why this neighborhood looks like a ghost town. A few people were back here trying to collect belongings. Many of them have just evacuated once again within the last hour. Now, AccuWeather's preliminary estimate for the total damage and economic loss from these fast-moving, wind-driven infernos has climbed to an estimated $250 billion to $275 billion. This is a staggering figure, and AccuWeather experts, they not only include insured and uninsured losses, but they consider many other factors, all of the financial impacts that go into a disaster like this. We're talking about the long-term medical and healthcare costs, damage to infrastructure, the business disruptions, the hundreds of thousands of customers who have lost power through those public safety power shutoffs, and all of the other financial impacts from a fire like this. And as you can see with the next graphic, AccuWeather experts say this is unfortunately the latest in a series of major extreme weather disasters that have been happening in recent months and recent years here in the United States. It's having a bigger toll on families and businesses and on the insurance industry as well. Now, these fast-moving, wind-driven infernos, they sent embers blowing right into these neighborhoods last week. Some people are concerned that scenario could happen once again when these Santa Ana winds pick up. Some homes burned to the ground, but others right next door made it through the fire somehow. Kendrick Royer says this is a wonderful neighborhood, but he's not sure how many of his neighbors who lost their homes can afford to ever come back.
People have always been phenomenal to one another, very, very close and helpful. many of them are older, and we don't know what they're going to want to do, if they're going to want to rebuild or if that's possible for them. Everybody has to reevaluate. I mean, I know everybody's got a different situation, and some couldn't get it, and so I really feel badly for them.
Kendrick's home survived the flames last week, but you could see his neighbors directly across the street lost everything. Now, the fire crews that are here right now, just a few moments ago, they were dousing these homes that are still standing in the vegetation. They're trying to prevent any flying embers or ash that may return to this neighborhood from sparking any more fires.
All right, Bill. Well, thank you so much for your update there, and for continued updates on the Los Angeles wildfires. You can always go around the clock to AccuWeather.com. You can follow us on social media, all of our social media platforms. And again, some of these people who Bill spoke with, that man came back temporarily to his house to seal up the vents and re-evacuate once again. Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us on our 1-hour special Wildfire Watch California in Crisis.
As deadly wildfires continue to burn in Southern California, intense Santa Ana winds are returning around Los Angeles.
And to help us break down details, we are now joined by AccuWeather California expert Ken Clark. Ken, you have been dialed into California weather for more than 4 decades, a big part of our forecast operation at AccuWeather for much of that time. Could you put this into context? Historically, how does this stack up among California wildfire history?
Well, California wildlife history, this is going to end up being certainly the costliest fire disaster ever in California's history and probably in the United States history. You go back over the years, the closest one to what will become this one is the Camp Fire back in 2018. And that wound up being about 12.5 to a little bit more than that $1 billion worth of damage. It, of course, took a lot of lives, over 80 lives there, and totally destroyed the town of Paradise. Here we have just a much more costly event. And it's kind of interesting to note here also that, at this point, 4 out of the last 5 costliest fires in the United States history were all in California. Now it'll be 4 of the last 5 because we're going to replace one, and all of those will have occurred since 2018. So it's amazing how historically important this is and how historically big this is. In my career, 5 decades now of forecasting the weather, I've never seen a situation combined like this. The winds, the dryness of the air and the ground, and also how late in the season this was and how much fire covered a large area and such an urban area as we had with this.
Now, Ken, you mentioned that this has been occurring more and more in recent years. And can you just talk a little bit more? You mentioned the winds and you mentioned the dry vegetation, the kind of combined impacts of those ingredients and how they were able to really spark this large flame and how that risk isn't quite done yet.
Well, we had a very strong jet stream over in the upper atmosphere blowing over Southern California last Tuesday at 5,000 to 7,000 feet over top of California. Winds were in the 70 to 80 knot range, hurricane force. And mountain waves, as they developed, what we call broke, and they caused those winds to come down to the surface and creating the very strong wind gusts. And in addition to that, the weather's been exceptionally dry across Southern California, not only since October, but since last April. We've only had like 1 to 3% of normal rainfall. So the ground is usually, by this time of year, wet and has had quite a bit of rain, 4, 5, 6 inches of rain, depending on where you're at. This year, we've had 1/10 of an inch, maybe a little higher than that in some areas. So we've got the combination of very strong winds. We have very dry ground still and very dry fuels out there. And we had a fire that started near 2 exceptionally large urban areas of Los Angeles.
Wow, a record-breaking start already to 2025. Not records we necessarily want to break. AccuWeather California expert Ken Clark, thank you so much for taking some time to join us.
And
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ken. As the Los Angeles wildfires continue to burn, other areas may be at risk this week.
Yeah, for a look at the challenges with these deadly fires and what's ahead, joining us is Char Miller, professor of environmental analysis and history at Sonoma College in California. He also authors and he's also the author of A Burn Scar, a new book on wildfire. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Miller.
Thank you so much for having me.
Professor Miller, what are some of the specific water challenges in planning and fighting fires with so many homes, so much population, and structures high in the hills here?
Well, as Ken pointed out, all of those things being true, there's two other factors, one of which is the topography, specifically of the Palisades, is rugged. It is tough to fight in on a good day. And this, on Tuesday of last week, this was an awful day. 100-mile-an-hour gusts are recorded all over the region, sustained winds of 60 to 70 miles. And then you've got this incredibly fast-moving fire. Some estimates say something like 3 American football fields in a minute were incinerated. There was nothing they could have done. There was not enough water. There was not enough water pressure. I don't care how many people you might have had, you couldn't have put this out. My comparison for this is you can't stop a hurricane, and you can't stop a hurricane-driven forest fire, or in this case, an urban fire.
Now, you spoke about this being a terrible day and comparing it to other natural disasters, and it's very much like that. With the high winds, Can you just talk a little bit more about how that impacted the firefighting strategy, both from the air and on the ground?
Good. That's a great question, and it helps get us at a nuance that we need to have in mind. An old adage that I was told by a firefighter was as follows. When the wind speed is 10 miles an hour, he said, I'm a firefighter. When the wind speed is 30 miles an hour, I'm an observer. And if the wind speed we now know is at 45 miles an hour, all planes, all helicopters are grounded. They can't go in and do what in Southern California is absolutely essential, which is to provide aerial support, because the ground itself, the topography in Palisades, in the San Gabriel Mountains, is some of the steepest areas in the country, really incredibly steep slopes, 50, 60, 70, 80% slopes. So you need something above to help you fight from the ground up. Well, if you don't have above, and if you're flashing thousands of gallons a minute on lower elevation structures, there's not enough water pressure to get it up to the fire hydrants up top. That's only part of the problem, and we'll have lots of investigations about this in the process. But one of the things that came out of the 2018 Woolsey fire, which was massive and flushed 300,000 people onto California freeways, was the firefighter said people expect way more than it's possible to deliver.
Wow. Harrowing words. Char Miller, professor of environmental analysis and history at Sonoma College. Thank you again for joining us.
Good evening. Tonight we bring you some of the most powerful and heart-wrenching footage coming out of Southern California, emerging from the wildfires raging in the region. I'm Mariela Scales, and these videos shared on AccuWeather social media channels capture the sheer intensity and devastating impact of the fires as they sweep through communities. From the brave efforts of firefighters battling the flames to the heartbreaking scenes of residents evacuating their homes, these images tell a story of resilience and solidarity in the face of disaster. Let's take a closer look at these compelling visuals and the unfolding situation. First, we head into Pacific Palisades, where it's the largest wildfire that has been burning. And you can see that homes, neighborhoods, communities decimated by the fire, and also the smoke filling the air with the burning chemicals from inside homes, from vehicles, causing very unhealthy air quality stretching across Southern California. As residents continue to see the damage, videos from Altadena, California show cars completely burned and buildings in the background in the Eaton fire, which has been an incredibly deadly fire. And you can see just the frame of the vehicles left behind, but the insides burning to ash. More drone video over the Pacific Palisades shows just a trail of destruction as the drone flies through the thick smoke and you can just see the flames burning these buildings. Very dramatic scenes there in Southern California. And it's not only the humans and the buildings that have been impacted, it's been the animals as well. Rescuers rushed to save horses from a barn in Altadena. You can see, of course, humans and the rescuers wearing the masks, but also the protection for the horses and their eyes as they look confused, being taken away from their barn.
For continued updates on the Los Angeles wildfires, go to AccuWeather.com and follow us on all of our social platforms.
The scope, the scale, and the erratic movements of these fires is truly unprecedented.
I met a couple yesterday who lost their home.
Winds coming in, fire's getting big, time to move.
All of the trees were on fire. It was definitely a sight to behold.
We could see open flames. I could see open flames in my backyard.
It was one of the worst moments of my life.
People are suffering.
Welcome back to our 1-hour special Wildfire Watch California in Crisis. I'm Jeff Cornish.
And I'm Bree Guy. Watching that video, it's hard to believe, it's hard to comprehend, but seeing it just from this point of view, devastating.
Yeah, this is not some remote area. This is in the city of Los Angeles and various parts of the metro as we continue to explore the devastating impact of these wind-driven infernos burning through parts of Los Angeles, from the cause behind it, the current challenges, and the path forward.
Now we want to give you a little bit more information on the timeline and exactly how we got here. Yeah, and we've really, we had two really good rainy seasons, 1 year ago and 2 years ago in Southern California. Not the case so far this year. In fact, in Los Angeles, Bree, we are tied for second place for second driest start to the rainy season. We hit reset on the odometer October 1st every year for the increasing likelihood of rain, and we just haven't seen much. Yeah, and you know, Jeff, this just puts this whole context into a perfect picture because this happens, right? We have those rainy seasons, but we have to stay on our guard. Yeah, and we just have not seen much of anything south of Interstate 80. San Diego down the road, you're at risk too here. You're actually in first place. Record driest start to the wet season. Least rain on record from October 1st to the present time, January 12th. 2 other years more than a century ago had at least more rain than this. This is the driest on record. Yeah, pretty impressive when you look back at the history. And when we look back at the history of what caused these wildfires, we have to go back into the fall. Yeah, that's when we got into that really dry spell. So the table was set. The winds increased last Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. The Palisades fire broke out. We were in our graphics meeting at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and that's when word rolled in that there was a big fire already on the move. Yeah, we were watching this basically unfold as it was first happening, and then by Tuesday evening, this is around 6:18 p.m. Pacific time, the Eaton fire goes up, and that starts to impact north of Altadena. Yeah, and many of you experienced the worst moment of your lifetime Tuesday night into early Wednesday morning. Evacuations expanded, fires tore through neighborhoods. Some of the fire hydrants up the hill, up at the Pacific Palisades, they ran dry. The same was the case into areas around Altadena. Yeah, and unfortunately, it doesn't even stop there. By Wednesday, additional fires that we were battling break out, and the Eaton and Palisades fires both exceed 10,000 acres. You know, at some points we were learning that these fires were spreading about 3 football fields per minute. And today now the death toll has risen to 24 and sadly rising. AccuWeather's estimate was increased to $225 to $250 billion in damage and loss, and crews prepare for extreme volatile weather again through the next couple of days through Wednesday, with again low containment for the Eaton and Palisades fires. So that'll be the big concern moving forward. And the risk again isn't quite over. We have a dangerous fire risk, and that includes a lot of the same areas that have been on fire or are threatened by it. And tomorrow marks a full week since the Los Angeles wildfires began. Joining us with the latest is David Akuna with CAL FIRE. What is the latest, David? Is there an update on the number of structures burned? Is containment increasing?
Hi, Jeff and Bree. Thank you for having me on. So we are continually assessing the structures. We have multiple damage inspection teams to identify how many structures are damaged and or destroyed. As far as containment goes, you're right, there it's low. It's only 14 and 33%. Respectively between the Palisades and the Eaton. And the reason for that is because with these winds shifting again, because on Tuesday, they came out of the north and the east. On Thursday, Friday, they came out of the west and the south, and now they're coming back from the north and the east. So with this battling wind shifting back and forth, we're worried that the containment lines could be breached by a smoky material jumping the line, which is why we're keeping it small and staying vigilant.
And regarding the air quality from burning homes, how are people preparing for that, and how are officials, again, messaging to the public aware of the hazardous material and particles in some of the wildfire smoke?
So on our incident page at fire.ca.gov, each of the incidents has their own information regarding the air quality, what steps they take, any mitigation steps that people can take for themselves. In general, if they can, stay inside, keep your air filters on, try not to run the air too much or increase the size of your air filter. And really that's the way to manage it until the winds come back in the other direction and blow the smoke clear.
And since the threat isn't quite over with so many buildings destroyed, are firefighters taking precautions to protect themselves from inhaling the toxic smoke?
Well, the threat is far from over. With 70-mile-per-hour winds predicted and beginning to build up today and tomorrow, that's going to be a significant threat to the lines, as well as to the potential new starts that we have out there. And yes, firefighters are using masks and other materials in order to protect their airways from this material.
All right, David Acuna with CAL FIRE, thank you so much for making some time for us. I know it's been an extraordinarily busy stretch for you and also the county-wide resources there in Los Angeles as well. Entire neighborhoods have been wiped from the map. More than 5,300 homes and other buildings destroyed by the Palisades fire alone.
Meanwhile, the Eaton fire in Altadena and Pasadena has damaged or destroyed at least 7,000 homes and other buildings. Residents are now left with unimaginable heartbreak. Allie Reed joins us now from Pacific Palisades.
Right, guys, and the devastation across this area has been absolutely staggering here. I got boots on the ground a number of hours ago now, really just trying to assess the damage myself, see a number of these neighborhoods and really take this all in. It is really something to see here. I mean, we've heard the terms, right? Apocalyptic. There is no doubt in my mind that this is something very close to that. Again, entire neighborhoods have really been wiped out here, and the damage has been so just absolutely devastating to take a look at. Look at this video on your screen here. This was just over the last few hours navigating my way through a number of these neighborhoods. The death toll from these fires has now risen to roughly 25, and officials warn that number could climb as specialized teams, including cadaver dogs, search through the rubble. More than 150,000 people remain under evacuation orders across Los Angeles County, and curfews are in effect from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. here in Pacific Palisades. Now, fire crews, if we can show you this video too, and other workers are back on the ground today, tackling a range of critical tasks. They're focusing on extinguishing hot spots, closely monitoring for flare-ups, and clearing debris from roads and power lines. Utility crews are racing to repair infrastructure, aiming to make the area safer as the community braces for the next challenge, a significant wind event expected to begin overnight. A red flag warning is in effect from 4 a.m. Tuesday through noon Wednesday. Winds expected to reach speeds capable of driving explosive fire growth, threatening to undo the progress that's already been made, right? Firefighters are working tirelessly to increase containment lines and protect nearby communities. All of this as residents attempt to survey the damage while struggling to process what they've lost. Take a listen.
I think I'm like everyone else, just shell-shocked and just trying to process the magnitude of what just happened. I've lived here my entire life. I've evacuated many, many times, and I have never seen anything like this. I don't have words. It's just unimaginable.
It really is heartbreaking to hear from the residents in this community. There's no doubt about that. And again, as we bring you live, just to show you some of the neighborhoods around us, I mean, you'll find cars similar to this one in nearly every single driveway that are completely burnt to a crisp. A lot of these residents are just trying to get back to their homes. Unfortunately, right now, crews need to do their jobs. And until they find it or deem it safe, a lot of these families are not able to come back to their homes. Certainly, this is something we're going to be paying attention to over the next couple of days as a lot of these families look for some positivity in the devastation here, guys.
Thank you so much, Allie. We appreciate you sharing their stories.
Yeah, difficult scenes there. Well, there are several ways that you can help those who have been impacted by the California wildfires. One is by making a donation to the American Red Cross. You can donate by going to redcross.org/AccuWeather, by calling 1-800-RED-CROSS, or you can always text Red Cross to 90999.
And you can also make a donation to these organizations: the LA Fire Department Foundation, the Pasadena Humane Society, and the California Community Foundation at the websites on your screen. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us for our 1-hour special Wildfire Watch California in Crisis. It has been almost a week since the wildfires began in Los Angeles, and wildfire smoke can travel thousands of miles away from the source.
And joining us now with more on protecting yourself and your children from dangerous air is Dr. Lisa Patel, Clinical Assistant Professor of Pediatrics at the Stanford School of Medicine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Lisa, with the wildfires, what are the dangers of breathing in this smoke and the hazardous fumes?
So during periods of wildfire exposure, the things we worry about, especially for young children, is that it irritates their lungs. And so I'm a pediatric hospitalist. I see more children coming to visit me in the emergency room for things like bronchitis, wheezing, asthma, and pneumonia.
And what are some of the specific health risks that children can experience from wildfire smoke even 2 to 4 years later? The long-term downstream impacts beyond the short-term impacts that you used.
So we're only now beginning to understand what the effects of what we're calling chronic exposure to wildfire smoke is, because we burn fossil fuels, because we have climate change. We are now seeing wildfires of worsening severity and frequency than we have in the past. So whereas children used to be exposed for a few days at a time every few years, now in places like California, wildfire smoke is more or less yearly and year-round. We're living a natural experiment. And so we have some studies from places where children were exposed to these massive wildfire smoke events and then following them a few years later. And what we see is an increased risk for reduced lung function, for needing more healthcare, utilizing healthcare more often, and increased antibiotic use.
Now, Lisa, what kind of particles can be in this smoke? And we know they can travel very long distances. Can they do short-term and long-term damage?
Exactly right. And what's really interesting in the literature is that people often think, well, this is a West Coast problem, I'm not being affected by it. But as you mentioned, that wildfire can travel for hundreds of miles. And so even hundreds of miles away, we see people being impacted by that poor air quality. So for people with chronic medical conditions, for people that are at risk for things like heart disease, stroke, diabetes, all of those people can be impacted by poor days of air quality from wildfires. We also see increased risk of dementia because that wildfire smoke is a neurotoxin. It damages our brain. And we have emerging evidence that it actually plays a role in our mental health as well, not just going through the experience, the trauma of wildfire, but the smoke itself is potentially a risk factor for things like anxiety and depression.
And on the AccuWeather app at AccuWeather.com, we have Plume Labs air quality data, and people can see on a neighborhood level what their air quality is likely to be. What would you recommend to people who see that they're facing an air quality hazard in their area? How can they protect themselves best from this dangerous smoke?
Limit your time outdoors, create a safe space indoors where you can guarantee that the air quality is as clean as it can be. And that means don't use your polluting gas stoves, because that also releases toxic things like benzene and NOx, which we know is a respiratory irritant. Invest in an air purifier, and these you can actually buy online for relatively cheap compared to what they used to be. If you can't afford one, you can DIY one with just a box fan and a HEPA filter that you can attach together. If you do need to go outside, again, limit your time outdoors, carry an N95 or KN95 with you to protect yourself. And then if you're in the car, just hit that recirculate air button so you're not bringing in dirty air from the outside into your vehicle.
That's a great point. Thank you so much, Dr. Lisa Patel, Clinical Assistant Professor of Pediatrics at the Stanford School of Medicine. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for covering this.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Patel. And with wildfires burning through Southern California, these are expected to be the costliest in modern history, not just in California, but for the entire nation.
Yeah, AccuWeather's Bill Wadell is in Pacific Palisades with more.
The damage left behind is truly catastrophic. After the wind carried embers and flames right into this neighborhood, some homes were saved, but others were burned to the ground. AccuWeather's preliminary estimate for the total damage and economic loss from these fast-moving, wind-driven infernos is now at $250 billion to $275 billion. The experts at AccuWeather are accounting for not just insured and uninsured losses, but all of the long-term medical costs, business disruptions, the impacts from evacuations and public safety power shutoffs, as well as the losses to tourism. All of that, which could take place over the next decade or longer. And AccuWeather experts warn that estimate could continue to climb in the coming days. Kendrick Royer says this is a wonderful community, but he's not sure how many of his neighbors will be able to secure or afford paying for the rising cost of insurance, let alone the skyrocketing costs to try and rebuild.
People have always been phenomenal to one another, very, very close and helpful. Many of them are older, and we don't know what they're going to want to do, if they're going to want to rebuild or if that's possible for them. Everybody has to reevaluate. I know everybody's got a different situation, and some couldn't get it, and so I really feel badly for them.
Now, Kendrick's home was spared by the flames last week, but his neighbors right across the street here, they lost nearly everything. Now, fire crews are going through this neighborhood. They are dousing the vegetation and also the surviving homes, trying to wet them down. They are preparing for the winds to pick up and the potential for more ash and embers to fly into these neighborhoods. They're doing everything they can to try and prevent more homes from catching fire. Reporting in Pacific Palisades, California, for AccuWeather, I'm Bill Wadell.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. And Bree, some of these images, the before and after contrast, before and after the fires, are pretty staggering.
I know. I mean, we were just looking at these, and it's still just so powerful watching what used to be and what it looks like now.
Yeah. Right here in downtown Pacific Palisades here. Just an amazing burn. You can see even through the holes in the building to other neighborhoods that have been destroyed. And there are so many images like this. This is amazing. This is a true same location. Here's Big Rock and Pacific Coastal Highway. You can't see the water in this perspective, but after the fires.
It's going to rotate a little bit. Gone.
Yeah, the whole house, it's missing there. It's just amazing. Horrible how these fires have just burnt through areas and into Altadena as well. You can see a large school. Many of children learn there every day, and that school has been destroyed.
Just terrible. I mean, these children who have to look possibly at these images and say what was and what is now there not, and what is to come in the future.
Yeah, very unsettling here. Says the Benjamin Franklin Elementary School. Here you can see the community church in Pacific Palisades, the entire roof line gone. That's the only real semblance of again, the same grid points here being on that map. And then into Wiley's Bait and Tackle here in Malibu. Also,
yeah, here's the sign, completely charred.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being with us here for this hour special on the AccuWeather Network.
Don't forget, for the latest updates on the California wildfires, go to AccuWeather.com and follow us on all our social media platforms.